Welcome to the Wellness Lab Digest, where we help you to absorb powerful, life-changing insights from top wellness experts with our daily, bite-sized wellness podcast summaries. Each episode is packed with distilled, powerful takeaways to boost your health and well-being. To support this podcast, please scroll down on whatever app you're listening on. Ratings and reviews are helpful. Even better, just send the show to a friend. Or check out our sponsors at the bottom of the page, or simply click the Support the Show link.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive with us. So today we're going to be tackling something that I think has been on a lot of people's minds these days, and that's basically like how to stay mentally strong. In a world that feels a little overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's something that I think resonates a lot right now with what's going on.
Totally. And I've got this amazing conversation to share with you it was a bunch of happiness experts that all got together for World Mental Health Day. And get this, even Elmo from Sesame Street was part of the discussion.
Oh, wow, interesting. I wouldn't have expected Elmo talking about mental health.
Right. But it makes sense when you think about it, because Sesame Street has always been about helping kids navigate their big feelings, but now they're kind of expanding that to help families facing all sorts of challenges. So whether you're feeling the weight of, current events or just looking for ways to boost your well-being, I think you'll find some really valuable insights in this deep dive.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. Where do we even begin?
Well, they started by talking about something I think we've all probably felt at some point: loneliness.
Oh, yeah. Which is kind of ironic when you think about it. I mean, we're more connected than ever through technology.
Yeah.
But loneliness seems to be on the rise.
Right. It's like we're surrounded by people online, but still feeling isolated in our real lives. The experts talked about how technology can create this illusion of connection. But it often comes at the expense of those deeper face-to-face interactions that we as humans really need.
Yeah. And it's not just a feeling, right? The Surgeon General has actually labeled loneliness a public health crisis, saying it's as harmful to our health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Whoa, okay. That puts it in perspective.
Yeah, it's pretty serious stuff.
It really is. And it's actually something that Sesame Workshop has been focusing on as well. They found that loneliness is affecting families in a big way, with parents and kids alike struggling to connect.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and this is where Elmo comes in. Remember that time he posted that simple question on social media, "How's everybody doing?"
Oh, yeah, I remember that. It went viral.
Totally. Millions of people responded, from, everyday people to celebrities to even world leaders. It was like everyone was just waiting for permission to answer that question.
Yeah, it's like that basic human need to connect. Even just a small gesture like that can kind of break down barriers and create a sense of community.
Exactly. So what did the experts recommend for actually combating loneliness?
Well, one of the biggest things they emphasized was the importance of prioritizing those real-life interactions over online ones.
Okay, but how do we actually do that, when our lives are so busy and screen-centric?
Right. Well, that's where being intentional comes in. The experts suggested things like volunteering. It gets you out there interacting with people and doing something good for your community at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you're likely to meet people who share your values too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's joining groups based on your interests, like a book club or a sports team or a cooking class, anything that gets you regularly interacting with people who get you.
So it's about finding your tribe, whether it's online or offline.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of those small everyday interactions too, like chatting with the barista at your coffee shop or giving someone a compliment. These little micro moments of connection can actually make a big difference.
Yeah, it's like reminding ourselves that we're part of a larger community, even in those seemingly insignificant moments.
Totally. It all adds up. And speaking of feeling overwhelmed, that's another thing the experts talked about, like managing the stress that comes from, everything that's going on these days.
Oh, yeah. I think we can all relate to that. The news can be relentless. Social media can be a minefield. And it's easy to get caught in this spiral of negativity.
Yeah, and it's like a constant barrage of information, not all of it good. But the experts had some really interesting advice for how to navigate this landscape and protect our mental well-being.
Okay, because sometimes it feels like you're just supposed to ignore all the bad stuff and focus on being happy. But that feels kind of fake, doesn't it?
Right, it's like toxic positivity. But the experts weren't saying to bury our heads in the sand. They emphasized that taking care of ourselves isn't selfish. It's actually essential if we want to be able to contribute to making the world a better place.
So it's about taking care of ourselves so we can take care of others.
Exactly. It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
When we're feeling depleted and burnt out, It's hard to be there for our loved ones, to do our work effectively, to advocate for the causes we care about.
Right. It's about building resilience, not denial.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So how do we actually build that resilience in the face of all this stress? Well, the experts had a few key tips.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Well, limiting screen time was a big one, especially when it comes to like consuming negative or traumatic content. It's about being informed, but not letting the 24/7 news cycle totally dictate your mood.
I know. Sometimes I feel like I need a social media detox just to function.
Yeah, you got to set those boundaries
Yeah,
and choose what you allow into your mental space.
for sure. What else did they suggest?
Physical activity was another big one. Dr. Joy Harden Bradford, one of the experts, talked about how even just a few minutes of movement can shift your energy and boost your mood. She's a big fan of impromptu dance parties.
Oh, I can get behind that. Hard to stay stressed when you're dancing around the kitchen.
Right. And then there's Gretchen Rubin, who you might know from her work on habits. She had this interesting suggestion for dealing with worry. She said you should schedule time for it.
Wait, schedule time to worry. How does that work?
I know it sounds counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But the idea is if you give yourself a specific time to worry, it can actually prevent those anxieties from taking over your whole day.
Mm.
You could say to yourself, okay, I'm not going to dwell on that right now because I have a designated worry time later.
So it's like compartmentalizing your worries instead of letting them run wild all the time.
Exactly. And Gretchen even recommends writing things down during your worry time. It can help to get those thoughts out of your head and onto paper, which can be surprisingly therapeutic.
It's like a worry journal.
Precisely. And then there's Dan Harris. He has a lot to say about the power of self-compassion.
Okay, self-compassion. I've heard that's a game changer. But honestly, sometimes it feels a little cheesy to me. Like, how do you actually do it?
Well, Dan's approach is pretty down to earth.
Yeah.
He talks about how so many of us have this harsh inner critic that's constantly putting us down. And he suggests replacing that inner drill sergeant with a more supportive coach.
Oh, so like be your own best friend instead of your own worst enemy.
Exactly. And he recommends this technique called the self-compassion break. It's a 3-step process that you can use anytime you're struggling.
Okay, I like a good 3-step process. Tell me more.
All right, so the first step is to simply acknowledge what's happening and recognize that it's a difficult moment. No judgment, just awareness.
Okay, so just accepting that you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed or whatever, that's step 1.
Yep. It sounds simple, but it's a powerful shift from resisting or denying those feelings. Then the second step is to remind yourself that you're not alone. Whatever you're going through, countless others are experiencing something similar.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. It's easy to feel isolated in our struggles, but we're all human rights. We all face challenges.
Absolutely. And then the final step is to offer yourself kindness, just as you would to a friend who was going through a tough time.
Okay, I see how that would be helpful. Instead of beating ourselves up, we're extending that same compassion and understanding, even when we mess up.
Exactly. And Dan actually has some interesting advice on how to make that self-talk more effective. He suggests talking to yourself the way you would talk to a good friend, even using casual language like dude or bro. He also recommends using your own name when talking to yourself. You can create a bit of helpful distance.
I've never thought about that before, but it makes a lot of sense. Like you're taking on the role of a supportive observer rather than getting lost in the emotional storm.
Precisely. And that's the essence of self-compassion. It's about recognizing that we're all imperfect and deserving of kindness,
Yeah.
even when we fall short.
Yeah, I love that. And it makes me think about how self-compassion might actually be a key ingredient in combating loneliness, too.
Oh, absolutely. When we're kinder to ourselves, we're more likely to reach out to others and nurture those connections that bring us joy and support. It's like this beautiful cycle of kindness that starts within and ripples outwards.
That's fascinating. I'm guessing there's even more to unpack here, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's a whole other layer to this conversation about kindness and how it can be a real superpower for navigating both loneliness and stress.
Awesome. Well, let's dive deeper into that. I'm ready for part 2.
Okay, so we talked about loneliness and we talked about stress as like these big challenges. But now I'm really curious to hear more about this idea of kindness as a superpower.
Yeah, it's a pretty powerful concept, right? And it was something that came up again and again in that conversation with the happiness experts.
Because it seems like kindness can kind of address both of those challenges. Like being kind to ourselves can help with stress, and being kind to others helps with loneliness.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a 2-for-1 deal for mental well-being. Okay, I'm sold. But like, how do we actually put that superpower into action? It's easy to say, be kind. But what does that actually look like? in our daily lives.
Well, they had some pretty practical advice about that. They talked about reaching out and checking in on your loved ones, even if it's just like a quick text or a phone call.
Yeah, because sometimes we just assume everyone's doing okay. But you never really know what someone might be going through behind the scenes.
Right, and that simple act of reaching out can make someone feel seen and cared for, which can make a huge difference in their day, especially if they're struggling with loneliness.
It's like a little reminder that they're not alone, that someone's got their back.
Exactly. And it's not just about reaching out to people you're already close to. They also talked about fostering a sense of community in a broader sense.
So like looking out for our neighbors, volunteering in our community, even just smiling at a stranger on the street.
Exactly. Those small gestures can create a ripple effect of kindness that goes way beyond just our immediate circle.
I love that imagery. Like we're planting little seeds of kindness everywhere we go.
And those seeds can blossom into something beautiful. Because when we create a culture of kindness, it benefits everyone.
This might seem like a silly question, but what about being kind to ourselves? That sometimes feels even harder than being kind to other people.
Oh, totally. It's way easier to be our own worst critics. But the experts really emphasize that self-compassion is just as important as compassion for others.
Because if we're constantly beating ourselves up, it's hard to show up for anyone else, right?
Exactly. Remember Dan Harris's motto, never worry alone.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's a good one. But how does that apply to self-compassion?
It's a reminder that we don't have to suffer in silence. We can reach out for support both from other people and from ourselves.
So instead of like berating ourselves for making a mistake, we can offer ourselves that same understanding and encouragement that we would give to a friend.
Exactly. And remember those tips Dan shared about talking to yourself like you would talk to a friend, using casual language,
Yeah.
using your own name. It all helps create that sense of distance and perspective.
Yeah, it's like you're stepping outside of yourself for a minute and offering a helping hand to that part of you that's struggling.
Exactly. And that is a powerful act of kindness.
Yeah.
Maybe the most powerful one.
Because when we can be kind to ourselves, even when we mess up, it creates this foundation of strength and resilience that allows us to be more compassionate toward others, too.
It's like a virtuous cycle.
Uh-huh.
Oh, and speaking of resources, Kristen Neff, one of those self-compassion experts, she has a new book coming out soon that specifically addresses burnout.
Oh, wow. That's timely. I'm sure a lot of people could benefit from her insights right now.
Absolutely. And I think her work speaks to a larger point that came up in this conversation. Mental well-being, it's an ongoing journey.
Yeah, it's not a destination, it's a process.
Exactly. It's about paying attention to our needs and making adjustments along the way, and being patient with ourselves as we learn and grow.
And it's about recognizing that we don't have to do it alone. There are resources available, there are people who care, there's a whole community out there rooting for us.
That's beautifully said. And I think it brings us back to the heart of this conversation. Connection.
Because whether we're talking about combating loneliness or managing stress, it all comes back to the power of human connection in the end, doesn't it?
It really does. Connection with ourselves, connection with others, connection with something bigger than ourselves.
And kindness is the key that unlocks those connections.
Absolutely. Kindness is the bridge that allows us to build relationships, to offer support, to receive support, and ultimately to create a world where everyone feels seen, heard, and valued.
It's like we're all threads in this tapestry of humanity. And kindness is the weaver that brings us all together.
Ooh, I like that. That's a beautiful image.
Yeah.
And it really speaks to the transformative power of kindness. Because when we choose kindness, we're choosing to create a more compassionate and connected world.
And that's a world I want to live in. But before we get too carried away with the big picture, I kind of want to bring it back down to earth for a minute. Because sometimes those big ideas can feel kind of overwhelming.
Right. It's like,
Sure.
okay, how do I actually put this into practice?
Exactly. So I'm curious, from all the tips and insights that we've discussed today, what's one thing that really resonated with you personally?
That's a great question. I think for me, it's Dan Harris's idea of talking to yourself the way you would talk to a friend. I've always been really hard on myself. But that simple shift in perspective has made such a difference in how I approach challenges.
Yeah, like you're offering yourself a pep talk instead of a beatdown.
Exactly. And it's amazing how much more effective that is. When I approach myself with kindness and understanding, I'm actually more motivated to make positive changes.
That's interesting, because we often think we need to be tough on ourselves to get results, but it sounds like the opposite might be true.
Yeah, it really does seem that way. And I think that's a powerful message for your listeners. Kindness both towards ourselves and others. It's not a weakness, it's a strength.
It's a superpower.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a superpower that is available to every single one of us.
I love that. So as we're wrapping up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave everyone listening with a little challenge.
Ooh, I like a good challenge.
Mm.
What do you have in mind?
I want to challenge everyone to think about one small act of kindness they can do today, either for themselves or for someone else.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be anything big or elaborate.
Exactly. It could be as simple as sending a supportive text to a friend, offering a genuine compliment to a coworker, or even just taking a few minutes for yourself to do something that you enjoy.
Yeah, it's about those small everyday acts that add up and create a more loving and compassionate world.
And I think that's a perfect segue into the final part of our deep dive, where we're going to explore how those small acts of kindness can create a ripple effect that transforms not just our own lives, but the world around us.
Awesome. I can't wait.
Okay, so we've talked about loneliness and stress and kindness being a superpower, but now I'm really curious about that ripple effect you mentioned. How can our own, individual acts of kindness actually make a bigger impact?
Well, think about Elmo's question. How is everybody doing? That one little thing sparked a global response. It reminded us that we're all connected and that even small gestures can have a big impact.
It's like throwing a pebble into a pond and watching the ripples spread out.
Yeah, exactly. And each act of kindness, no matter how small it is, creates those ripples. When we smile at someone, it might brighten their day. And then maybe they go and do something kind for somebody else, and so on and so forth.
It's a chain reaction of positivity.
Precisely. And those chain reactions can have a huge impact on our communities and even the world. Because when we create a culture of kindness, we're creating a world where people feel safer and supported and valued.
And that kind of world is less likely to struggle with all the loneliness and stress we talked about.
Exactly. It all comes full circle. By taking care of our own mental well-being and being kind to others, we're actually making the world a more compassionate and connected place.
So it's like we're all pieces of a puzzle. And kindness is what holds us all together.
I love that. And it reminds us that we're not alone in this. There are so many people out there committed to making the world better, one kind act at a time.
And those acts can be so many different things, like volunteering at a soup kitchen, or donating to a cause, or just helping out a neighbor.
Or even just listening to a friend who's having a hard time. Or encouraging a coworker who is stressed out. Or being kind to ourselves when we make mistakes.
It's about recognizing that every interaction, no matter how small, can make a difference.
And remember, it all starts with you.
Yeah.
You have the power to choose kindness in every moment. And those choices create ripples that go way beyond your own little world.
It's pretty empowering to think that we all have that ability. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to encourage you to think about what you've learned and how you can apply these ideas to your own life.
What small act of kindness can you do today? How can you support and encourage the people around you? And how can you be kind to yourself when you face challenges?
Those are great questions. I hope you'll really think about those. Because even the tiniest act of kindness can have a huge impact. And when we all choose kindness, we're creating a brighter future for everyone.
And if you're looking for some inspiration or guidance on this journey, I definitely recommend checking out the work of those experts we mentioned. Gretchen Rubin, Dr. Joy Harden, Bradford Dan Harris, and Dr. Kristen Neff.
And don't forget about Sesame Street. They have awesome resources for families on being kind and empathetic and taking care of your mental well-being.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And remember, you have the power to make a difference.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Wellness Lab Digest. If you receive value from the podcast, I have 3 asks of you. 1, share the show on social media with your friends and tag the show at the Wellness Lab Digest on Instagram. Number 2, please leave a rating and review in whatever app you're listening on. And last but not least, please let me know what topics you would like us to cover in the future. You can contact me at empoweringmen.org/contact. And right now we have a free ebook to get you started on your wellness journey as well. That's empoweringmen.org/contact. To support this podcast, check out our sponsors at the bottom of the page or simply click the Support the Show link.